Okay, we're back. Second lecture on the endocrine system. Okay, so this will be 203endo2. All right. So we end up here. Let's look at this, reiterate a little bit of what we talked about before in the last lecture. And there's first fluctuations in receptor number. So if there's a reduced amount of hormone in the blood, target cells will upregulate, make more receptors to try to capture more of this hormone and be more stimulated. However, if there's too much hormone in the blood, they will downregulate, being overstimulated, and they'll reduce the number of receptors. And this, you could mostly relate to this also with drugs, with illegal drugs, with opioids. It's the same thing, opioids attached to opioid receptors in your brain. So why are people who are taking these opioids go through withdrawal symptoms once they stop taking them? And that's because they've overstimulated their brain, and their brain downregulates the opioid receptors. That's why you have to take more and more to get the same high. And you depend upon actually natural opioids to be pain-free and to feel normal. And so now you're off the illegal drugs, and now your own brain cells kick in the natural opioids, but there's so few receptors that you feel like crap for days or weeks until those receptors until they upregulate and get the normal number of receptors. Same thing with the men who take anabolic steroids to pump up in the gym. That's very similar to testosterone, and testosterone receptors are downregulated, and your testes sort of shrivel up with these anabolic steroids. So that's one of the downsides of, and it's another illegal drug that's a downside to. Okay. Then remember the hormone interactions. Synergistic, they work together. Permissive, they work together in a different way. One works at one time, and then the other one works at the other time to do the same role. And then antagonistic, exact opposite roles. Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip these next two slides and come back to them, because they're kind of out of context here. When we get into talking about the pituitary hormones, then we'll come back to these and talk about this nutrient metabolism terminology, absorptive and post-absorptive state. So I'm going to come back to this, because I want to jump now, first talk about this, and then when we talk about growth hormone and other things, we'll talk about these nutrients. Because several of these pituitary hormones affects nutrient metabolism. Okay, the hypothalamus pituitary arrangement. Pituitary, also known as the hypophysis, is actually two glands in one. The posterior or neural hypophysis, and this is actual nerve tissue, neuroendocrine tissue. And then the anterior or adenohypophysis. The posterior pituitary makes two hormones, and they're actually made by cells in the hypothalamus of the brain, and then they're transported down to the posterior pituitary where they're released there. And the two hormones are ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. And in the urinary chapter and fluids and electrolytes, next semester, we'll talk much more about ADH. It is a water conserving hormone. If you get really, really dehydrated, you'll be making lots of ADH, and it makes certain tubules in your kidney permeable to water, so you can conserve water. Okay, oxytocin contracts smooth muscle. the really important smooth muscle that contracts are in females. That is uterus during labor, and smooth muscle in breasts for milk letdown, for breastfeeding. It's also the love hormone. It's people who really care for each other in love. They make more oxytocin. I'm not sure why. Okay. Anterior or adenal hypophysis. It's regular gland tissue, and it makes 6 hormones. Here is the arrangement. Now this should be right on your book here. I think it's on page 678. So there's the hypothalamus part of the brain, and there's the what's called the infundibulum, is a little thin stalk of nerve tissue that goes down to the posterior pituitary, and then right next to it is the anterior pituitary. So these happen to be right next to each other, but they're really two really different glands. And there is something called the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cardiovascular arrangements here. And next semester we'll talk a lot more about it. But the normal situation in the cardiovascular system is you have arteries break up into arterioles, break up into a bed of capillaries where a gas exchange occurs and nutrient exchange and waste products. And then those capillaries coalesce into venules. Venules coalesce into veins, and you go back to the heart. So one set of capillaries. A portal system, 2 sets of capillaries. These arterioles break up into capillaries. They coalesce into venules, and the venules coalesce into a portal vein. Usually it's called portal vein. In the kidneys, it's also actually called an arteriole, but I don't know why they do it. And then this portal vein travels to someplace else, either a different organ or same place in the same organ, a different place in the same organ, and breaks up into the second set of capillaries. And then those capillaries coalesce into venules and veins, and it goes back to the heart. So 2 sets of capillaries. It only happens 2 places in the body. This is the first place. Hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. When we get to the digestive system next semester, we'll learn about the hepatic portal system. And finally, again next semester, in the kidneys, there's a portal system that's totally within the kidneys. It's a renal portal system. Okay, so, and this is important to know because, oh, that's right. There's an error in this figure. It has this set of capillaries down by the infundibulum. Well, that's not correct. It's not. The first set of capillaries is up in the hypothalamus, up here, not down here. So this is a error in the figure. Okay. Oh, and this arrangement, this dual gland is in the most protected place in your body. It's in what's called the sella turcica in the sphenoid bone, and it's surrounded by bone on all sides. And they actually do surgery on it. I don't know how they do surgery. They have to actually go up to your nasal passages, I think, to do surgery on it. Anyway. Okay, and here's the thing. Okay, control of secretion of hormones from the posterior pituitary. So one thing we gotta talk about, control of secretion of hormones. So remember, one of the ways you turn on hormone secretion is by nervous system. called neuroendocrine reflexes, releasing hormones in response to signals from the nervous system. Remember, the nervous system, hormonal system, or humoral way to turn on hormones. Okay, so an example of this is the release of oxytocin, called the milk ejection. Suckling of the infant stimulates sensory nerves that goes into the woman's brain and turns on oxytocin. The oxytocin comes down and contracts smooth muscle and pushes the milk out. Remember, this is a permissive thing. First, prolactin builds up the breast tissue and makes the milk, and then oxytocin releases it. Then dehydration causing release of ADH. So if you get really dehydrated, you have a thirst center in your brain, an osmoregulatory center. It detects that the water concentration in your blood is really dropping, instructs the cells in the hypothalamus to make ADH and to release it from the posterior pituitary. It goes to the kidney and conserves water. Okay. Then secretion of the anterior pituitary is hormonal. They're turned on by hormones, by releasing hormones. So secretion of anterior pituitary hormones under the control of releasing or inhibiting hormones from the hypothalamus. So here's the thing, releasing hormones secreted the capillaries in the hypothalamus. So we're saying that first set of capillaries is the hypothalamus. Those releasing hormones are put in. The capillaries coalesce into the hypophyseal portal system. Sometimes called the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. Releasing hormones leave capillaries in the anterior pituitary. So it forms the hypophyseal portal vein, goes to the anterior pituitary, breaks up into capillaries. The releasing hormones come out. They bind to receptors on the cells in the anterior pituitary, and these anterior pituitaries make hormones in response to that. And then they're put into the second set of capillaries, and they go throughout the entire body. Okay. So, binding of releasing hormones by target cells causes the production and release of anterior lobe hormone or anterior pituitary hormones. So here's the thing. There's going to be a lot of hormones here. And remember, there are releasing hormones. If it says releasing hormone, that's a hypothalamic hormone, right? If it says stimulating or trophic hormone, that's going to be an anterior pituitary hormone. So it's important to keep track of these. And they all have abbreviations. You're going to need to know the abbreviations because I'm going to put the abbreviations on the exam to make sure I fit everything in. So there's gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. There's thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH. There's corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH. And there's growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH, right? There's also prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH, somatostatin or GH and TH inhibiting hormone. So then you go to the anterior pituitary hormones. See how it says follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, luteinizing hormone, LH, thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, and adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. So stimulating or trophic are anterior pituitary hormones. All right, so this is right out of the book on page 680. So again, they got these first set of capillaries in the wrong place. But anyway, so we've got thyroid stimulating hormone, releases thyroid gland, stimulates thyroid gland to release thyroid hormone. And we're going to have three axes. What I call, we have a triple hormone, three hormones interacting with each other. So you're going to have thyroid releasing hormone, TR be secreted from the hypothalamus, goes to the anterior pituitary for the anterior pituitary cells to secrete thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone goes to the thyroid to cause a release of thyroid hormone, to stimulate the release of thyroid hormone or thyroxine. And then that thyroid hormone feeds back up on the brain to turn off the, once you get enough thyroid hormone, goes back to the brain, turns off TRH and TSH from the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. The other, we'll get the other two axes. Then prolactin acts on mammary glands to stimulate milk production. We talked about that. Follicle stimulating hormone, FSH and luteinizing hormone, act on the gonads, testes and ovaries to stimulate development of gametes and the stimulation of the sex steroids, the androgens, testosterone being the most common, and the estrogens, estradiol being the most common. So that is actually another axis. GRNRH from hypothalamus stimulates FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary, stimulates testosterone or estradiol from the gonads, and they feed back upon the brain to turn off their own stimulation again. Then the third axis is with the adrenal gland. The adrenal cortex secretes steroid hormones, a couple different kinds of hormones, cortisol being the most common that we're going to be talking about. So now we're talking about the adrenal cortex now, not the medulla. The medulla does something different. It secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. And that's neurally stimulated. But so you have corticotrophin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, secreted and travels to the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary secretes ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, which goes to the adrenal cortex to stimulate the secretion of cortisol. And cortisol will feed back upon the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary to turn off CRH and ACTH. So that's the third axis of three hormones working together to do one thing. Then GH, growth hormone. It stimulates growth all over the body, mostly talking about bone, muscle, adipose. So it has target cells all over the place. So it's interesting to talk about target cells. Some hormones have really restricted target cells, right? What are the target cells for TSH, and where are they? They're in the thyroid gland. That's it. TSH goes through the entire body, but it only attaches and stimulates the cells in the thyroid gland. That's it. But thyroid gland itself has target cells all over the body. Same thing with GH, got target cells all over the body. Right. So there's the releasing hormones up here and all this stimulating or trophic hormones down here. Okay. So now we're going to talk about growth hormone and effects that it has. And it has these metabolic effects. So we got to go back. Now we're going to go back to those two slides and talk about these metabolic processes. So you know what we're talking about on this slide. So we're going to go back. End the show. Go back to... where are they? Not going back far enough. Yeah, I'm not going back far enough. Here we go. Or nutrient metabolism. So we're talking about energy yielding nutrients that we make ATP from. So, so we're talking about glucose, fatty acids, and glycerol, and amino acids. Glucose and fatty acids stored as larger molecules. Remember, glucose is stored as glycogen in liver and in muscle. Fatty acids stored as triglycerides in adipose tissue. Right? So these is our stored energy. Amino acids are made into proteins, and the excess, if you eat more amino acids than you need, or eat more protein than you need, that's turned into fat and sent to adipose tissue. Okay, we got to talk about two states, the absorptive state and a post-absorptive. And again, we're going to talk about this again next semester because we have a whole chapter on metabolism. But we need to talk about it now because these processes are stimulated by these anterior pituitary hormones. So, or inhibited. So absorptive state is just while you're eating, just after you've eaten, maybe a couple of hours after you've finished eating is the absorptive state. And so what you're going to do is, you digest these big nutrient molecules, the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins that you eat. You digest them into monomers, into glucose, fatty acids and glycerol, or amino acids. And they, and all of those nutrients go straight to your liver, except for the fat, goes straight to adipose tissue. But the rest of them go through the hepatic portal system from your intestine to the liver, and the liver starts making these storage molecules. Glycogenesis is the making of glycogen, and that's our carbohydrate storage molecule. Lipogenesis is making lipids. Now there's two types of lipids: dietary lipids, like the fat that you eat, right? And this goes straight to adipose tissue. And then there's lipogenesis, making your own fat from excess food. So if you eat more carbohydrates, you have this glycogen gas tank in your liver and muscles. And it's a certain size. And when it's filled, that's it. You can't put any more into it. So if you have extra carbohydrates, they're converted into fat by lipogenesis. They're put into these little storage, these little transport lipoproteins called VLDLs, and they're sent to adipose tissue. Right? And then protein anabolism. So during the absorptive state, you're taking the nutrients you ate and you're storing them, put them into larger storage molecules, or you're making proteins from the amino acids. And remember, your liver makes lots of different proteins. Anabolism means build up. You're making proteins from the amino acids that you ate. And again, if you ate more amino acids than you needed to make these proteins, they're converted to fat and they're sent to adipose tissue. Okay. Okay, it's been hours since you've eaten. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the last time I ate was dinner last night. I didn't eat any breakfast today, so I'm pretty much post-absorptive. Well, I had a little cream in my coffee, so it's a little bit, but I'm pretty much post-absorptive right now. So in a post-absorptive state, you start breaking down these storage molecules. You build them up in the absorptive. Now you break them down to make ATP between meals. So now you break down the glycogen, and that's called glycogenolysis. And now all these words look similar, so you got to be careful about them. Genesis means you're making something. Lysis means you're breaking down something. Right? So glycogenolysis is you're breaking down glycogen into individual glucose monomers and put into the blood to maintain blood sugar between meals. All right. Lipolysis, breaking apart lipids. And and then you put those into the blood, and they go to cells, and the cells make ATP from them. And through the course of the day, you're really living off of both of those. You're breaking down glycogen for glucose, you're breaking down fats for fatty acids, and you're living off of that. The longer you go without eating, the more and more you start breaking down fat, because your glycogen gas tank is just so much. And when you start getting low on the glycogen, your brain gets worried, because your brain has to have glucose. So then the longer you go without eating, the more and more you use fat to fuel all of your cells, and your brain saves the glucose for itself. Okay. Protein catabolism. Now this doesn't really happen until you're really post-absorptive, when you start breaking down proteins for ATP. Because protein is energy yielding macromolecule. You can make ATP for proteins, but generally you don't unless you really go a long time without eating. And then you got to break down your own muscle tissue to keep yourself alive. And also, if you go a long time without eating, you might be doing something called gluconeogenesis as well. This is making glucose from non-carbohydrates, mostly amino acids. You can make it from glycerol, glucose from glycerol. It's a part of triglycerides, but mostly they're made from what's called the glucogenic amino acids. Half the amino acids you can make glucose from. And you will start doing that if you run out of glycogen. Start running out because your brain is dependent upon glucose. And oftentimes I say, what happens to your blood glucose if you don't eat all day, or a couple of days, or a week? What happens to your blood glucose? Nothing happens to your blood glucose. Blood glucose is like body temperature, like blood pH. It's a homeostatic variable. It never changes very much. If it does really drop, you're going to pass out, because your brain has to have the glucose. So even if you don't eat any glucose, or you haven't eaten a long time, you still got to make that glucose, and that's called gluconeogenesis. So I'm so post-absorptive, maybe I'm doing a little bit of gluconeogenesis. Okay. So here are the processes again. I think I will talk about these and then move on to the next lecture. So liver and muscle tissue. Glucogenesis is the formation of glycogen from glucose. Glycogenolysis is the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. Gluconeogenesis is formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. For example, amino acids, mostly amino acids. That's glucose metabolism. Okay. Adipose connective tissue. Lipogenesis, lipolysis. So formation of triglycerides from glycerol and fatty acids in the liver, making your own fat. Lipolysis is a breakdown of triglycerides to glycerol and fatty acids. And then all cells, especially muscle, protein anabolism and protein catabolism. So synthesis of proteins from amino acids, and the catabolism breakdown of protein to amino acids. Right. Okay, so we can go ahead and start talking about some of these hormones that have metabolic effects that stimulate certain things. And here is growth hormone. The stimulus up here. Variables that influence the release of GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, from the hypothalamus, age, time of day, nutrient levels in the blood, and stress and exercise. You're going to be releasing nutrient hormones. In order to grow, you need ATP. And so it's all a process of catabolism now. And in post-absorptive state to release these nutrients so you can make cells and grow larger cells. Okay, The hypothalamus responds to various stimuli, these stimuli up here. Control center, hypothalamus releases growth hormone and releasing hormone into the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. In response, number 4, the GHRH, the anterior pituitary, releases growth hormone. Growth hormone stimulates hepatocytes to release insulin-like growth factor into the blood, and both GH and IgH stimulate target cells, effectors. And what do? Affect the bone, muscle, liver tissue, adipose tissue, all cells. Increase growth, increase amino acid uptake, stimulate mitosis, making more cells, and cell differentiation to make blasts into sites, for example. Liver tissue, increased glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, and decreased glycogenesis. Now you could be breaking down glycogen now, and you can be making glucose possibly from amino acids, and adipose tissue increased lipolysis. You break down the fat in adipose tissue to send to cells so it can make ATP and decrease lipogenesis. Making fat, you'd be breaking it down. And this is how growth hormone stimulates growth. And then increased protein synthesis, mitosis, cell differentiation, particularly in cartilage, muscle, bone, release of stored nutrients in the blood. Finally, increased levels of both GH and IgH inhibit the release of GH and IgH from the hypothalamus. Increased levels of GH also inhibit the release of GH from the anterior pituitary. So you can see that most, and remember, this is negative feedback. This is how most hormones are regulated, by negative feedback. They are going to negatively feedback because they're already high enough and they've already done their job. So now you want to turn them off. So it's important to turn on hormone stimulation, but also important to turn it off when it's done its job. So they will feedback upon the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary to turn off their own secretion. All right. Then let's talk about growth hormone disorders, and then we'll end this particular lecture. 2 disorders: pituitary dwarfism, not enough growth hormone, and gigantism, too much hormone. So pituitary. So what's the shortest somebody could be? Normal heights range from about 4'11", 4'10", somewhere around there, to about 7'5", somewhere around there. That's not dwarfism or gigantism. That's just a normal range, a bell-shaped curve of human heights. Something down low 4 feet or 3 feet, we're talking about dwarfism, not enough growth hormone. In gigantism, too much growth hormone. And you get people that are 8 and 9 feet tall. I think the tallest person one time was 9 feet tall. That is too much growth hormone when you're young. If you get too much growth hormone when you're older, you get what's called acromegaly, which is still going to be pretty big, but you really, once you complete the epiphyseal plates in your bone, your long bones, we'll talk about those in the bone chapter, they're not going to grow any taller. But a couple of bones in your body can grow your entire life if you've got a lot of growth hormone. One is your mandible. You grow a big, huge lantern jaw. And also your clavicle can grow. So these people have, when they're older, have these huge, lantern jaws. If you remember the wrestler Andre the Giant, he was also in The Princess Bride. This guy definitely had acromegaly. Okay, so for a bunch of these hormones, one additional thing you're going to need to know is some disorders, and it's always 2 disorders. 1, not enough of this hormone. 2, too much of this hormone will cause different disorders. Okay. Okay, on that, we're gonna call it. Okay, see you on the next video.